But the idea that the challenge of reselling, which is a pretty big challenge in display, when you've got just frankly limitless pool of impressions that you can buy and sell, then obviously buyers don't necessarily know what they're getting. And frankly, because they're using data as a proxy to what they're buying anyway, they're taking a lot of risks. But in this instance, Ads.txt has certainly acknowledged the problem. Publishers have realized that problem, and then buyers have therefore acknowledged Ads.txt as a really, really good solution for the market. Will it scale? Does it actually solve the root cause of the problem? No, because the root cause of the problem really is that buyers are essentially using software to make their purchasing and planning decisions in a lot of cases, not in every case. Roli's going to punch me in a minute if I keep going down this path here. But in a lot of cases, that's what they're doing. They're feeding it into a DSP and saying, you choose where I buy. And Ads.txt kind of makes sure that there is a level of safety associated with that now. But the real problem is they shouldn't do that. They should actually choose where they want to run and just leverage the automation and the targeting that the DSP can provide instead of just letting it make all the decisions. So yes, on one hand, it's a plaster.
I mean, I think there's governance when it comes to even within programmatic and you're buying across 1,000 sites. I don't think it's true that, we just go in and we just buy across 1,000 sites. There are measures that you put in place to ensure that you are as safe as you can possibly be within a programmatic environment, Nigel. I mean... She
threatened me backstage as well before he came out.
I did. I did do kickboxing in my spare time, so I did tell him that afterwards I'll be having words. Yeah. Anyways, I think there are measurements they're in place. And, with Ads.cert next year when that comes into play, I mean, it's not just only about verifying that a business is now licensed to sell inventory, but ultimately we're going to have to authenticate the supply chain within that real-time bidding environment. And that would ultimately boost buyers' confidence, in RTB.
Christian, it'd be interesting to hear from you how many, the response you've seen from brands in terms of wanting to come and make sure they're putting their money into safe content.
Right, yeah. I think tragedy is following me. It's a bad thing. I've been at Maker and Disney when PewDiePie happened, and I sat on the board of Studio 71. Logan Paul happened earlier. So started my own business. I hope that it will not happen again. And I think the brand safety issues, of course, they have been in one way blown up by some publishers as well, right? Making headlines on Sunday Times. But they've been around for some years, right? It's kind of like odd to see them popping up after so many years. The reality is that, yes, brands became much more sensitive, and there are several layers of actually how you can tackle this. And I can tell you, you can absolutely buy premium, and you can buy 100% brand safe on YouTube. It's working, right? There are several layers. There's IES, for example, as a base layer. There's double verify, just to get the verification right. Then there are ways of buying channels, right? There are whitelists from Google Preferred. There are some suppliers that actually give you the channels. So the second layer.
I was just thinking about this premium thing again. I think the massive difference between YouTube, between Google, Facebook, and with TV is regulation. So the thing that I think puts a certain level of premiumness into television is we're very heavily regulated, and rightly so, and the impacts of us breaking any of those regulations are absolutely severe from a broadcasting perspective, let alone an advertising perspective. So I'd like to throw it back out to the panel that maybe one definition of premium is that there's a regulatory body that is making sure that your behaviours are controlled, and there are penalties and consequences to bad acting and bad behaviour. So I think we love that about TV. I think that gives us a great sell to advertisers. That we are heavily motivated to do the right thing. And I would argue that maybe in the other environments, that lack of regulation is what allows the bad acting to propagate. There is no way to stop people doing the wrong thing in there.
Regulation doesn't cover brand safety. Okay. And brand safety is probably one of the biggest concerns for any advertiser. In actual fact, it really should be table stakes. I mean, certainly an advertiser, if you told them that their ad might not be viewed, it's a bit ridiculous. The idea that you're going to buy something and someone might not see it, it's kind of crazy. You're going to spend this money. So I think brand safety is obviously one of the most important in terms of the things to be challenged. We talked about brand adjacency, actually, in TVs, where it's being slightly different when you're watching a video, because you could be watching a movie that does have a lot of blood and guts in it, or a lot of killing, or a lot of unsavory adult content, but people will still advertise in those breaks. if you had that content on the web and you had an advert next to it, everyone would be up in arms.
So that is heavily regulated
so the rules,
TV then.
Okay,
heavily
fair. So the rules are very different, and
Yeah.
certainly there's times, there's watersheds and things like that. But I think what you have to remember is, of course, the legislation isn't applying to everyone. So your definition of premium, I think I largely agree with, which is this idea where you can assume brand safety by default.
We have to cover GDPR. It's been huge. So, I guess sort of as briefly as you can be about the topic. How big of an impact has it had so far, or maybe will it have when we start seeing like rulings made?
I mean, I remember, I don't know if you guys, I hope everyone in this room is old enough to remember the Millennium Bug, when it was like, December 31st, 1999, the world was going to come to an end, right? And the clocks were going to stop at 000, and, we're all not supposed to be here. We should have been dead by now. And I also remember, I mean a bit of an exaggeration when it comes to that analogy, but I also remember going to M&S to change some money, just to change a simple transaction, take some dollars, change to pounds for me. And they were like, I have to ask you some questions. Are you okay with M&S storing your data? I'm like, what? And then they asked me a list of questions. We have to do this before we can make this transaction. And I'm like, is this as a result of GDPR? And I was told, yes. I think, we've all been affected by GDPR. All companies have been affected by GDPR. I would argue that, yes, there was a bit of kind of like panic pre the implementation of GDPR. But if you think about what's happened post-GDPR, there's not been that much of an impact. Data-driven targeting still exists. I mean, yes, it's reduced the supply chain, and we've all been forced. Publishers have been forced to look at their supply chain. DPAs have had to be signed. Everyone has had to. Legitimate interest has also remained as well. But I think that we've panicked, but it's been a good guideline or regulation for our industry. But I think we just over-panicked. And this enforcement is actually okay. What would you have to say, Nigel, to that?
Staying out
Well,
of this
nothing now.
I'd help him out.
What she said.
If you look at the industry, the losers, I mean, there have been some US companies like Drawbridge that were using probabilistic data and were heavily depending on opt-in data, just pulled out of Europe altogether, although they are heavily funded, right? So they knew actually with e-privacy coming and GDPR that the retargeting space is under heavy pressure in Europe at the moment.
It's
obviously
given the control to the publisher. Of course, they can choose.
That's right.
Who's reselling it. There's parallels with Ads.txt there as well.
Yeah.
So publishers are actually no. I didn't know you were on my list.
Honestly believe that not every publisher, but many publishers have just started too late in the game to collecting opt-ins. The UK is leading the space. If you talk about Channel 4 or ITV Hub, they all have like massive numbers of registrations where they have opt-ins, but they also have deterministic data of targeting audiences. So they're in good shape. But we were talking about the fragmented market. What about all the 1,000 publishers you're buying today, right? Not just the big ones, the big four, plus Facebook and Google obviously has the opt-in anyway. So I think it really depends on the country. But the winners of GDPR are probably Facebook, Google, but also ITV and Channel 4 because they have started early collecting registrations.
I'm not sure if GDPR is completely brilliant for Google and Facebook. I think the people that should own the data are the customers. That ultimately the end journey for this will be that me and all of you and everyone in this room owns their own data and has complete visibility about where it is being used and for what purpose, and they have the right to yank it anytime that they want. And conversely, to give it anytime they want. So I don't ever really want to see Google and Facebook owning my data or indeed anyone else's, or Sky for that matter, or any company.